Today, I'm sitting with Lou Kerner, the CEO of BIGToken. BIGToken is a publicly traded company providing permission-first consumer data management. Lou started his career as a Wall Street analyst, spending 4 years at Goldman Sachs before transitioning to operating tech companies. His first CEO role was at the top-level domain, the .tv Corporation. He successfully sold .tv to VeriSign for over $100 million back in 2001. Lou was later the CEO of Bolt Media, the largest social media company before MySpace. After Bolt, Lou became an angel investor, best known for writing the first Wall Street-style research report on Facebook in 2010. Lou later launched a small VC fund in 2012 and later joined Flight Ventures, where he focused on tech companies founded by Israeli teams. And since 2017, Lou has been focused on Bitcoin and crypto as an analyst, an investor, and an advisor. Lou, welcome to the show.
Yes.
So I bring people on this show that I consider to be docents. The defined term for docent is a tour guide in a museum, an art gallery, or a zoo, but I think of docents a little differently. I loosely define the term docents as the people that have influenced and helped shape the people that we later become. These people may include your family, friends, teachers, employers, or more. Docents aren't just the people that we've met or spoken directly to, though. They're also the people that we read about, the people we see on TV. Docents are the people that we idolize, the people that have impacted us in ways that have helped shape the people that we are today. So like I said, I bring people on this show that I consider to be docents. Lou, you, my friend, are a docent. In fact, you are one of my docents. I owe a great deal of gratitude to you because had I never met you back in 2005 when you found me and bought my company, then I would have never met my then girlfriend, now wife, and had these 4 kids. So the audience needs to know that Lou was the CEO of Bolt Media, as I said earlier, and they bought my startup back in 2005, which I met my then girlfriend, who's now my wife. I had a video sharing site, which was the #1 video sharing site. He found me. I don't know how the hell he found me, but we'll talk about that later. But before we get into that, what I'd really like to know, Lou, who were your docents growing up?
Yeah, it was funny when I heard you talking about that and I started thinking about it. I really hadn't thought very much about it. And, I would say, obviously, my father, obviously, my parents had a huge impact on me, as every parent does. But, I really, I think foolishly probably didn't spend a lot of time getting mentors or docents, thinking that I had a lot of the answers myself and could figure it out. And when I really look back and think about, well, who is the first person who really, I really felt I learned a tremendous amount from and massively impacted my life. And I would really say it was Bill Gross from Idea Lab. I had been I had run some small companies, paid my own way through undergraduate and graduate school, and had worked on Wall Street for 7 years. And so obviously with those experience, when Bill Gross hired me as CEO of the 55th company in the Idea Lab Accelerator in Los Angeles in January of 2000, obviously I knew how to run a tech company. And very quickly I realized, oh my God, I don't know anything. But being a part of the Idea Lab ecosystem, and I was literally, about 15 feet away from Bill Gross's a desk. He at the time he had 55 companies in the Idea Lab Accelerator in LA, and we were his favorite, and he wanted to be able to look up and see me, and he taught me really a tremendous amount. I like what you said about me. I really feel like I owe him a debt of gratitude. And for anybody who doesn't know him, the best way to get to know him is he gave one of the best TED Talks I've ever seen, where he did a data-driven analysis of the more than 200 companies he started.
You just retweeted that the other day, right? Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's funny. Exactly. Only because, and by the way, I tell that story and his findings as often as any business story that I tell, because, not through in the TED Talk, but the data-driven analysis, he says he thought it was all about the idea. That's why I call it Idea Lab. After a couple of years, he realized it was all about the management, and then he ran the numbers. And it turns out the dominant factor is timing.
Yeah, timing's everything. There's no question.
So what I would say in summary is execution definitely matters a lot. The idea matters a lot, but timing might matter even more. And the best way to really assess timing is to really look whether consumers are really ready for what you have to offer them, and to be really, really honest about it, not be in denial about any results that you see. Because if you have something you love, you want to push it forward, but you have to be very, very honest about that factor on timing.
Yeah. And nobody can get timing right, but what you can do is
what I always
around.
say is like your success is having the opportunities, then making the right choices, and then a little bit of luck. And that's the timing part, right? You and I will talk about it later. We had some bad luck too, right? So there's good luck in life. There's bad luck. It's what you make of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It turns out luck is a double-edged sword.
You know what? There's a question I asked Anthony. Got to ask you the same question. I'm on Clubhouse all the time with all these Bitcoin influencer guys, and we always try to break.
Yeah. And by the way, congratulations. Seriously, I mean, it's really been amazing, like to see you totally blow up, to come in, not know, I talked to you a lot about crypto before you saw the crypto light, but and that's fine. Everybody gets their own way, but man, once you saw it,
no doubt. I mean, obviously, I had a bag that I held, but I didn't have complete conviction. And when I was talking to these people on there, like American Hodl and Jimmy Song and some of these others, and listening to Max Kaiser, which I honestly didn't even know who Max Kaiser. I hate to say this publicly, but I honestly didn't know who he was until I was on Clubhouse. I mean, because all these other guys been in the trenches on the subreddits and the Bitcoin Twitter and stuff, and it's like I was too busy running a business for all those years. I wasn't focused, But yeah, I got on there, and one of the questions we ask on the show, on the stage, to just break it up sometimes, is we'll say, "Who are your top 3 rappers of all time?" So you got to give me that answer.
Sure. So I would say. Number one, it's got to be Eminem. He's really the first rapper that I ever got into. Number 2, actually, I saw for the first time at my first real Bitcoin conference that I went to was BTC Miami in 2018 at a T0 party. Flo Rida got up and just totally rocked.
Flo Rida.
I saw Nas at Austin.
Nas is badass.
And he was, So.
What about Biggie or Tupac? Like, you just weren't really into hip hop, so you just didn't listen to their music back then?
Wasn't really my thing. But certainly, I've heard that the Biggie documentary is supposed to be awesome.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I saw it the other night. It came out on the 1st. Yeah, it's great. Let me go back. Let's go back to your childhood. So where did you grow up? You grew up in LA, right?
Yeah. Grew up in Sherman Oaks, went to UCLA undergrad. At the time, it cost $25 a quarter the first year. So it was $75 the first year. And the second year, they raised it to $75 a quarter. And there were student riots.
And so what did your dad do? What did your mom do? What was occupations? What kind of lifestyle did they have?
I was actually 4th generation Hollywood. So my great-grandfather was one of the co-founders of Paramount, known as the Lasky Players. My grandfather was running distribution for MGM in the 30s when Hitler rose to power, and he eventually left. Fought in the French Resistance. That's where my mom was born when my grandfather was fighting World War II, and then my grandfather at the end of the war was able to get to the U.S. Because MGM brought him over. But by that time, and the cables got crossed, and so when he got to MGM, they brought him to the sound department and made him a sound editor. And he was just so happy to be in the U.S. He didn't say anything. He sat down, and he was a sound editor for 40 years. He was the second longest MGM employee when he retired. He won the Guild Award for cutting the sound for Ben-Hur. And my father, who kind of had only kind of gone to a couple years of junior college when he got married to my mom, and my grandfather got him into the sound union. And my father was a sound editor, eventually opening up his own post-production company. And so I would say I grew up, middle class, upper middle class. My dad was an entrepreneur, so that's what I grew up seeing. And and there were times I remember. It's funny when I was growing up, like the bill collectors would come and pound on the front door, and at 6 a.m, and my dad or mom would come in and say shh. And it's funny because I was talking to my sister about even though I have those memories, I don't have any memories of ever feeling like we were poor or didn't have money or weren't going to eat.
Yeah.
I asked my sister if she ever did. My sister said, the only time I remember, she's 3 years older than me, she said was when she got she crashed her bike and broke her leg. And she remembered on the way to the hospital wondering if her parents, if they could afford the hospital bill.
That's interesting though, because when I was talking to Scaramucci, he had a feeling of anxiety a little bit. Not that he was, look, my parents weren't poor. My dad was a crane operator and my dad was a carpenter. My stepdad that raised me and my biological dad was a painter they're both union guys. And so times were tough during recessions. It was like, I kind of felt that energy that, there just was a negative energy during the tough times. And I guess as I got older, I was like, I don't want that. I'd rather be a business owner because then I got multiple sources of income coming in. I'm not worried about someone tapping me on the shoulder and letting me go because I during the 90s, you remember there was a recession. I remember they were out of work for a while during that recession. And that always resonated with it. Stuck with me for whatever reason. Didn't stick with everybody. For me, it stuck with me.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Like I remember my dad, because my dad spent many years working at the studios before he started his own post-production. And, there was a TV season, the TV season would end and everybody would get laid off and then they'd make more movies and he'd work like a dog. Yeah, exactly. I remember like shortly before, my dad, like they were working him like a dog. He comes home and he said that, his boss went to his boss and said, hey, we're working these guys, too hard. They're dropping like flies. And his boss said that his boss told him, shut up and get more flies.
But that had to be some influence to you, right? That your dad was an entrepreneur.
Well, of course,
I would imagine,
yeah.
right? So,
that's what you grow up. That's what you grow up knowing. And in part, like that's what makes it so impressive about you and what you've accomplished, not having that and having the perspective. Even how old were you when I bought your company?
26, I think. Yeah.
So I mean, you were really young. And I thought that it had great, just a great view, and particularly where you would come from, but very quickly, the most, as I've told you before, the most impressive thing was he was a 26. You come to the company and you immediately start dating the hottest girl at the company. Who was also,
I don't know how that happened.
An incredibly awesome, nice, smart, hardworking.
Yeah.
Incredible person, right? She's all-American lacrosse.
She was an all-American lacrosse player in high school. She's going to be embarrassed that I'm saying this because she doesn't like talking about it. But she went to BC on a scholarship. She was a great athlete. And she was really smart too. Her parents were both educators. She was really smart. How the hell I did that, Lou? I'm a good sales guy. I don't know what to tell you.
Exactly. Yeah. Scaramucci, right? That's how you got Scaramucci, right? It was from her.
Yeah, I met him through them. Exactly. Like 15 plus years ago when I first met her. She brought me over there one day. This is a funny story. I might as well tell it. So we go to his house. She goes, I want to go over to Scaramucci's. I used to babysit there and I haven't seen the kids in a while. So let's go over there. I go over to the house first time. We drive up. And I think I'm tough shit. I got my little BMW in my 20s, right? So I pull up to his house and I'm like, it's the end of this cul-de-sac in Manhasset. And it's this monstrous house. And I'm like, holy shit, who are these people, right? So we pull up in the driveway. This guy answers the door. He's wearing Carhartt overalls. He's got paint all over. It's in his hair, all over the place. And I go, yeah, how you doing? We're here for Anthony Scaramucci. And he looks past me and he goes, Caitlin, who's this fucking guy? It was Anthony Scaramucci. And I was like, oh shit, I feel like an idiot. Now, I didn't know who he was. Scaramucci wasn't famous. He didn't become famous until about a few years after that. He went on like this publicity thing for his fund because he was democratizing hedge funds and wanted to get high nets in for like $50,000, $100,000 checks. So he needed to appeal to that audience, right? So then he became famous. He started going on CNBC a bunch, kind of like you do.
Yeah,
he got in the book Wall Street.
No, Anthony Scaramucci. He's got a real...
No, I know. I get it. But the point is, he went on like a PR stunt for like years. He still is. I think he was in a reality TV show.
Core competency, right? And by the way, Brad,
very good at it.
There are an infinite number of ways to skin the cat, and when you're that good at anything, you can accomplish a lot.
So you said you had a sister, right? Competitive with your sister, your siblings? Did you have any other siblings?
She was 3 years older than me, and didn't really care for me for good reason until. I was 13 and she was 16, and she realized that I was getting stoned, and that was really the first thing that we did together. But
now you're friends.
Yeah. But I really credit my sister because my sister decided when I was like 4 years old that she was going to teach me how to read. And so she literally, she's 3 years older. So, she would literally like force me and sit me down, and she wouldn't let me up until like I picked up a little bit. And after doing this for a few months, I could read. And so I get to kindergarten and, and I could read. I was really kid in the class who could read. And from that moment on, right, I thought she started my career. Hey, this kid's smart. And then they start giving you special accommodations or whatever. And so, I really like attribute a lot of my early school success to her and really getting off, in the Malcolm Gladwell book about, which one, but about how, why people become great at anything, and
sure.
right,
10,000 hours. Yeah.
The hockey player thing, the Canadian hockey player lesson. the majority of kids in the NHL players, Canadians in the NHL are have January birthdays. You know why?
Oh yeah, I did hear that once. Yeah.
Yeah, because the January you're
It
part
matters.
of the year. Yeah, and on average in January you're a little bit bigger, and then you get a little more attention,
Sure.
and playing time, and that's why.
Yeah, there's a really good friend of mine. You remember him? He worked at Yashi, Maurice Worthy. So Maurice was a great wrestler in high school, 2-time state champ, undefeated last 2 years of high school. His brother was a 3-time state champ, undefeated for 3 years, sophomore through 5 state titles, right? But a good friend of theirs is a guy named Damian Hahn. And to your point, his father Miles Hahn, he held him back 8th grade. So by the time he was a senior in high school, he was a year older. And then he went to Minnesota and he redshirted, and then he won the national championship in college.
Oh, wow.
It matters because you're like 2 years older than every other senior by the time you're a senior.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like that with learning too, obviously education. Bill, our mutual friend, right? So Bill encouraged us to put our kids through Kumon, and they're already like 2 grades ahead on math. It's been a tremendous jumpstart for them. And I think it's like same thing with money, right? It's compounding interest. Like you put the money in and you got to let it compound over time. It's the same thing with knowledge. The earlier you start on these things, especially at that age, like you got 18 years before you're a senior. You got a lot of time. It feels like it when you're a kid, but as you get older, you realize that's not a lot of time, right? But it really does have a huge impact on you later on. Let me ask you this, because your parents and your family was in Hollywood. Did you meet influential people, famous people? You told me you've been to like the Oscars and stuff when you were younger. So tell us about that. And did that make success feel attainable because you got to meet them and you're like, oh, they're just normal people?
Yeah. So when you say meet them, I was in the same room as them sometimes.
Okay.
Not necessarily meeting them, because what are the difference between East and West is, I really didn't know anybody growing up who like went to camp. That like kids didn't go to camp on the West Coast. So we would just, get up in the morning and hang out. And, oftentimes my dad would bring me to whatever studio he was working at. And I would literally just spend the day, roaming around, the studio. And I would literally hang out on the Mary Tyler Moore set and watch them shoot.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and all kinds of Walton Mountain. There was a show called The White Shadow. I don't know, you might be too young, but it was.
I don't remember that one. Yeah.
And it's a guy, like a former NBA player who goes to the inner city school and to coach basketball. And so there were a lot of young kids, so I could go down there and hang out with them and shoot around. But no, that didn't help. And growing up in Hollywood, kind of my main takeaway from Hollywood was that it wasn't a very meritocratic place, and that it was all about who you knew. And so. But
did that teach you anything? Because that's the way the world is, really, right? So did that teach you like I got to figure out how to know more people? I mean, you eventually went to Stanford University, but it wasn't the Stanford we think of today, as my guess back then, right? Like, but did you think of it as a networking opportunity?
I think it was largely the thing. I mean, for whatever reason, it's really funny. For whatever reason, like when I was in the 8th grade, I literally decided that I wanted to go to Harvard Business School. And so
wow.
A lot of my decisions from the 8th grade were made through that prism of going to Harvard Business School and then having the choice of both, and that's literally, I think, the peak when I got into both of those out of college. And when I had the choice to choose and I got educated, the choice actually was quite easy.
Did you go to Harvard?
No. Actually, it's actually one of my favorite stories. That and again, it makes me like I'm going, oh, I'm such a great guy, but it's, I think, a funny story. And I generally only tell it to Harvard Business School people. But it was that I really want to go to Harvard Business School. That's for and I didn't even know that like people worked for 2 years. So I really want to do this thing that I really even wasn't that educated about. And so I got into Harvard Business School right out of undergrad, and I accepted. And then I got a call from Stanford saying, "Hey, you're in, but you're probably the only person to come. You can come. You can work for 2 years. Why don't you figure it out?" And I got educated, realized, I gotta postpone 2 years. I don't want to be the only kid that has no idea what they're talking about. So I called Harvard to defer, and they wouldn't let me defer. And I was shocked. How could you not let me defer? It hadn't occurred to me. And I argued with them, and they said, no. And finally I said, okay, well then I guess I'm going to Stanford because they were letting me defer. And they said, oh, hold on a minute.
Let me ask you, early on, did you have any like trauma of any sort in your life when you were early? Maybe created some anxiety or grit that maybe led to your success? Do you remember anything early on in your life?
I've been fired many, many times from different jobs. Many, many times. I struggled to work for other people or, My first job.
You're unemployable.
At a gas station. My mom's friend owned husband owned a gas station. And so the first day went well. The second day, everything's going fine. Some car pulled in, needed some oil, and totaled him up. And he was leaving, and I turned around and said, did I remember to take the thing out of the back of his car? And he pulled out with the thing and gas all over the place. Yeah. So I had a bunch of things like that, but, I wouldn't say anything traumatic. I mean, it's funny. My parents fought.
Yeah.
My parents fought a bit, and my sister and I talked about it. I grew up thinking that my parents had a dysfunctional marriage, and then you grow up and you take a look and you have your own marriage. You go, Jesus Christ, compared to everybody else's, they actually had an amazing marriage. Yeah. And both my parents came from homes that there was not a lot of love. They were both only children. My dad spent a year in an orphanage, 5 to 6 years old, and yet they grew up in a house filled with love. And so. So I have been, relative, trauma and death and stuff that's part of humanity. And, I've had my share.
What was the first death that you could remember of a family member that was close to you? How old?
I would say by a wide margin. I would say the most dramatic. I was just going to say my sister. I'm the only family I have in the world, right? Because both my parents are only children, so I have no first cousins. And her 21-year-old son committed suicide, shot himself. And so that
your sisters, this is your nephew.
Yeah. And so he had problems with depressions, and, they were all over it, his parents. And, so that's, and you never get over that. And that's,
how old were you guys when that happened? How old were you then?
This was, like 10 years ago.
Wow.
And you never, right, as a parent, you never recover from that. No. There's no recovery from that. There's only learning how to live with it.
Yeah, my mom, the first death that I remember, I was 5 years old. My mom had another child, my brother, and he died of SIDS, and that was a pretty defining moment in my life.
Oh, wow. How old? So he was a baby.
He was a baby. Yeah, he was 6 months old. I think it was around 6 months old.
Your mom. Yeah.
They'll never recover from that. No, that was a tough one. So, okay, let's switch gears. Getting depressed here.
It's going to be a light show, but
Exactly, getting heavier. Tell me which book has had the most impact on your life that you can recall?
Moneyball.
Interesting. And why?
It's all about data. Jesus Christ. It's not about the gut. Unless, maybe.
You start with intuition, but you use data to refine, right?
Yeah. And, I think, I really believe, capitalism's a bitch, man. I left Wall Street. I bounced around a little bit actually before I got to Wall Street, and I was there, during the real heyday, and I was an analyst during the greatest period on Wall Street for analysts ever. And but I was still working for the man. But I would bounce around long enough that I didn't kind of want to bounce around a lot more, and I followed cable and satellite companies, and every cable guy I met was literally a billionaire. And how is that possible? Well, they own monopolies. So I said, well, I know capitalism's a bitch, but if I can think of an internet monopoly. And so Bill Gross from Idealab offered me to be CEO of .tv, which is an internet monopoly, and that's why I left. But, every other business since then, because I haven't been able to find another monopoly, capitalism's a bitch. And the question is, what's your edge? Because if you don't have an edge, and by the way, being smarter, that's not an edge. Lots of really smart, hardworking people out there. So you really have to figure out an edge. And Moneyball, when I love Moneyball, that's right. That's a guy who figured out an edge, who used data to get an edge. And shockingly, even, now, 30 years, I don't know how the book is, but data, and if you are better and deeper and are looking at other data, that there's still an edge in almost every industry in that.
Peter Thiel, what does he say? Competition is for losers, right? He's right.
I don't know so what do you do with that?
So basically saying create a monopoly. As he says it in the book, 0 to 1. He says, he was an investor obviously in Facebook, and it's like, you got to have something that is monopolistic in nature. And so I have this thesis when I make investments, it's DSD. Is it differentiated? Do you believe it's scalable, or is it already scaling? If it is, well, bets are off. It's like Clubhouse is already scaling at 1, right? And then if it scales, this is the problem for Clubhouse potentially, is how is it defensible? Like, what are the hooks that you have that makes the barrier to exit really high so that the users don't want to leave? Because you can't just not, it's not like we sold our company to Nexstar Broadcasting, and Perry Sook, right, running the business. That's a monopoly by nature because you have to get an FCC license to have it. And he has 50% market share in every major city in the country. Nobody can compete with them at this point, right? That's very rare that you get that. .TV is a great example. There's only going to be one .TV. And if you want .TV,
TV is TV in every country in the world. It's TV in China. Korea, actually, for whatever weird reason, was our second biggest country outside the U.S.
Did you ever think that when you were a kid, I never even thought about business or anything like this when I was younger, but as you started getting older, did you actually think you'd ever be the CEO of a publicly traded company? I mean, I know it's a pink sheet still, but I mean, this is amazing. I mean, if you think about it, how many? I guess there's 3,000 public companies, but still, it's only you're in a room of only 3,000 CEOs.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You said that. I mean, I like being the CEO of a big company is kind of, never, I would say, my dream. That said, in the Harvard Business School application, now I'm bringing it up again, but it said, why do you want to go to Harvard? And I got a book of Fortune 500 CEOs biographies and went through and filled the page up with Harvard Business. Just said this guy, CEO of Exxon, HBS, 1964, and just filled out that question with that answer.
Did you play sports when you were younger?
Not a lot. It's weird. I always assumed that I was not good at sports because other kids, from a very young age were much better but I think as I got older, I realized that, as I said, my dad didn't have a lot of love in his life. And so like my dad never really threw a ball around with me or taught me sport. So, and then I realized, that other dads did that. So the other kids who could throw around the ball, there was a reason they could throw around the ball and I couldn't. And so now actually I play a lot of sports and still, play a lot of sports, love playing basketball, tennis, been a runner. I've done 5 marathons.
You told me when we were both, like one day you decided to go for a run and you did that for how many days? I mean, you just were committed to that.
Yeah, something clicked, right? Sometimes things just click, right? And your life is one moment different than it was the next. Yeah, I started running. I was a little bit overweight. I wouldn't say I was called myself fat, but I was a little overweight. And I ran one day just for, I can't remember, random reason. And I said, wow, this is awesome. And I ran for, when I got up to like 350 or something, I really had to pay a very heavy price for getting to run. And then I needed to run 3 miles. That was what, and it was,
it's addictive.
And it was, there's a great quote by, now I can't remember who said it, but it's foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. That just doing the same thing again and again and again because that's what you do for no real reason, is stupid. And I think, on one hand, consistency is good and helps do a lot, but a foolish consistency, not so much. So at 350, I said, okay, at 500, I'm done. And then I will stop.
Making up a random number just to get it over with.
It's a big round number.
And now you still run. You just don't have to do it every day.
Correct. Yes.
So outside of sports, though, were you competitive in nature? Like, were you a competitive person growing up?
Yeah. I assume
like academically.
I assume you were very competitive.
Yeah, I was pretty competitive. Yeah. Did you play chess as a kid?
Not well, but I played chess just with my friends. I'm playing chess now. It's right. The whole. Did you play chess?
Well, the Queen's Gambit got us all back into it. The kids are playing it. It's so cool.
Exactly. Yeah. I started taking for the first time ever. I'm taking chess lessons now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we got a book for kids, a chess book for kids. And my daughter actually has been beating me a couple of times now. I'm like, wait a second, I got to take this more seriously. Exactly. I'm on Clubhouse on my earphones.
Yes, exactly. No, Mike.
She's like, Ma, I beat Dad. I'm like, oh, dude, no, that doesn't count.
Exactly. That is the same exact thing that happened to me. And I said, look, I'm fine with my kids beating me at whatever, but I'm not fine at them beating me because I suck.
As a student, what kind of grades did you remember your SAT scores? Like what kind of grades did you get?
Yeah, I got very high grades. Again, I was lucky. I think, school came very easy to me. My sister was straight A's and if that's what was expected and that's, that's what I did. But also I worked at it. UCLA was very hard. It was not easy to get good grades at UCLA. I got a tremendous education at UCLA at zero cost, and I went to Stanford Business School and at a massive cost. Yep. I got very little education. But the people that I met at Stanford have been 100x the impact on my business life as a people.
Did you know that going in? Like, because that is the value, in my opinion. If you go to like an Ivy League or a tier 2, which is right at that Ivy League level, like that's all about the network. Were you thinking that when you were in high school?
People say it, but no. I mean, so much in life for me, until you actually live it and experience it, it's really hard to appreciate it for what it is. And the weirdest thing about it is, it's actually even more and more. For me, my experience has been it's only been more impactful the older I've gotten, and the more senior my friends have gotten. So the more now we're able to actually really profoundly help each other.
Really help each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people these days say that college is too expensive and it's not worth the investment. What do you think for the kids going to school? Like, do you think it makes sense? I say if you're going to Ivy League, it totally makes sense because of the network. But even outside Ivy League, I think it makes sense because it just teaches you something, teaches you time management. There's a lot of things to teach you. What do you think about that discussion?
So, it's
pretty popular nowadays to say don't go to school.
It's a super interesting question because it's like one of these things, and that and increasingly there's so many where you think something and you think that this is a fact, right? And I've always believed that this is true. Period. Stop. And then really, like the first person that I heard like saying don't go to college was Peter Thiel.
Yeah, it pays you not to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I really thought that was stupid. I thought that maybe for those kids they get money, but saying school is bad, I thought he was doing the country a disservice. But Jesus Christ, it's a complex question. What I do know is that going to school, so you can get a job at Starbucks and have $200,000 of debt is a massive problem for this country, right? I mean that is and selling kids on a bill of goods that they have to go to college and get this $200,000 of debt is horrible.
What doesn't make sense to me, Lou? My cousin went to school as a pre-med, and he went to medical school. He's an orthopedic surgeon now. I went to school for pre-law, and the other people go to school to be a teacher. Why is the teacher's undergrad the same price as the pre-med guy? They're not going to have the same outcome. It doesn't make any sense. That part never. I even thought that back when I was a senior in high school. I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, I think that same thing, but differently. Look, we are a rich enough country that education should be free, full stop, all the way. And if we didn't fight wars, we could do that, right? I mean, seriously, well, we could do that with MMT. It doesn't matter, right? It's crazy in my, and by the way, obviously, it's also part of what leads to greater income inequality. Right, because if your parents are wealthy, the education, you don't have loans to pay off, and you can make different career choices. And kids who have, it's just a horrible system that we have, and there are no. Part of the problem is these things are no easy answers. In fact, they're almost intractable.
How did you decide you wanted to go to Wall Street? What made you think to do that?
So
was it just happening back then? It was the 80s, right? When you got in?
So I had always liked stocks. It's a form of gambling. I joke. Growing up in LA, I've been to Vegas more than 100 times, and I can still remember the time that I won.
The time.
Yes, exactly. So I've stopped gambling. Something one day clicked, and I said, you know what? It turns out the house wins, and most of the time. So so I was living in LA. I had bought a small company in the film industry. I had grown its revenue in a couple years by 50%. And then I realized that when you buy a small company and you grow at 50%, it's still really small. And my friends who had gone to Wall Street now we're 5 years in since graduating business school, they're starting to make some serious coin. And my ex is from New York, and she had a fear of earthquakes or a house earthquake, and she wanted to get out of, she wanted to leave and go move to New York, and I didn't want to leave, but she had to leave. And so I'm saying, fine, I don't really even know. I'll see if I can get a job as an equity analyst on Wall Street. And I interviewed like 60 places and got one job offer, and that's all you need.
What is your superpower?
I think at this age, my superpower is the ability to appreciate kind of the special lens that I have on the world, that everybody has a special lens on the world. Everybody sees things differently than everybody else. And I think, at this point, I'm able to have tremendous conviction about things once in a great while that I'm able to see because of kind of my unique vision. And I don't necessarily have to be the only person who sees it, right? And when you say that something is early or late, but having the vision of what early and late is, I think I told you my favorite crypto tweet is I think from 2011 to 2012. I can't believe I sold all my Bitcoin at 6 cents. It's 80 cents now.
Yeah, he thought he saw a top tick. What is your kryptonite?
I'm attracted to shiny objects.
I think we all are.
Hard
right?
not, it's hard not to be. And so, and it turns out that, more often than not, they're not shiny, right? One of the, I think that we're all just a bunch of chemicals, that exist to procreate. And so I think of everything that we do in the light of that. So I think of all our traits, you can say, oh yeah, that helps us procreate. But one of the things that I struggled with for a while is the tendency of humans to believe that the grass is greener on the other side, because more often than not, the grass is not greener on the other side. So why is it that we think the grass is greener? And the reason that we do that is because, I came to the realization after a little while that actually we're not all of these chemicals that are leading us to procreate. It's not leading us as individuals to procreate. It's leading us as a species to procreate. So we do things that actually might not be good for us as individuals on average, but that are good for the species. And I think the grass is greener. Sometimes it is. And sometimes you see a whole new world that if Christopher Columbus didn't get on the boat and go, So like lemmings, why do lemmings jump off, right? The cliffs. It's not good for them as individuals, but for the species, it's a good thing.
I want to go back. So what was the first entrepreneurial experience that you had? What was the first business that you started?
The first business that I could remember was I had this little electronic. It was in grade school. I was in 5th or 6th grade. I had this little, this is in the early days, obviously, of the electronics. And I had this little game, and you would press it, and it would be a slot machine. And, things would go around, and then, it had a little payoff at the bottom. And I went around school and let the other kids play my slot machine. And
you take the quarters or something and put it in there? Is that how it worked?
I got to be the house. The bets were a nickel.
You can't lose. You found a monopoly.
I was the only kid with a casino at school at the time.
Are you a frugal person?
I guess, it's funny. I don't buy anything. Like now, I was a nomad for 6 months. So I literally, when my ex wanted to divorce me, she served me. I stayed in the house for 8 months. Cause I was already living in a separate room downstairs, which was pretty sweet. And I had 3 kids that I wanted to hang around. And I stayed in the house for 8 months until one day I woke up, and now we're going through the divorce trial. And I didn't blame her for wanting to divorce me. It wasn't a great marriage, time to move on. But after 8 months, I realized, oh my God, she played me. I was shocked. She had been months, at least 6 months before, she started moving assets around and doing funky shit that now, and I was shocked. And so I left the house with nothing and came back a couple days later to take my kids to dinner, went upstairs, got a pillow full of socks and underwear. Have I told you this story before?
Yeah, but I would love to hear it again for the audience. It's great.
Yes. So anyways, got up and got a pillowcase full of socks and underwear. And I'm leaving and taking the kids. And my ex says, hey, what's in the pillowcase? And I go, socks and underwear. She says, let me see. I go, let you see? What the fuck are you talking about, let you see? He says, well, if you don't let me see, I'm going to call the police. So 20 minutes later, the police are there, and the police ask what happened. She tells them what happened. The police say, well, is it his house too? Yes. Do you ever train or no? And the police look at her very sternly and go, hey, we got better things to do than this. You have to promise us that you're not going to come here, that you won't call us about this again. This is his house. He can come and go as he wants. And
by the way, you're thinking victory
exactly,
at that point.
Obviously victory. And so they come over to me and they say, hey, can we see what's in the pillowcase? I go, sure. I open it up. They see the socks and underwear. And they say, so when your wife said that she was going to call the police if you didn't show her what was in the pillowcase, how come you didn't show what was in the pillowcase? And I said, and they say, hey, we got better things to do.
You're like, noted.
Exactly. The next time she wants to see what's in the pillowcase, you got to promise you're going to show her what's in the pillowcase. And so I said, sure.
And then she looks at you and goes, victory.
Exactly. And so.
And you're like, fuck, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
This is why we're getting divorced.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So, I'm taking 3 kids to dinner. And, one of the kids says to me, yells at me, Dad, what the fuck? And I said, look, you don't understand. There's kind of this power struggle going on. And he goes, Dad, look, guys going through a divorce. One of you is going to have to not be crazy. And it's not going to be Mom.
Oh, jeez. That's awesome.
And I have not been in the house since. So literally everything I owned up until that point was in that house. And I'd say, okay, you know what? Doesn't matter. I don't need to go in that house anymore. And I have not been in the house since. So
you told me years ago, when I built my house and you came and looked at it during the construction and stuff, I remember you telling me, I forget who you quoted it from. I think George Carlin. You're like, you do realize a house is just where you put your shit. I was like, that's a good point. You go, do you have a lot of shit? It's a big house. It's like, I'm probably going to need to buy more shit.
and now literally I was a nomad. And I have literally like one big suitcase. Now I'm living with my girlfriend. Moved in a couple months ago. I'm not a nomad anymore, but and by the way, people own nice stuff. God bless. Everybody makes, is happy for different reasons.
If you had to measure your ego, your pride, and your humility, ego, pride, humility, what percentage would you give each?
Wow, that's a brutal question. I would say that I still definitely overweight for ego and pride. But I think that I'm fortunate that I've been humbled. I think one of the most humbling things was my experience with you, and in the company that we were building together and getting sued out of business, not because we did anything wrong, but because we were actually really good at what we did. And the world thought we were a bigger company than we were because we were good at that. And like everything else, It's a double-edged sword, and we got sued out of business. And that, I didn't operate again until now because of how hard that was, because, highs of entrepreneurship are amazing, but that low was devastating. And I didn't want to have that low again.
I want to get into Bolt. Before I go there, and we're going to go into there right now. It's actually next on my list. You're still pushing the ball forward, right? We always say pound ball forward, right? So you're still doing that, right? And what is it? Is it about money? Is it about pride? Is it about showing your kids that you're working on something? Is it to help the kids and gain more wealth for them? Why do you keep doing it? Do you just want to be relevant? Like, what's the reason why you push forward?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is I'm curious. I want to learn, man. The world's a fascinating place. And this is, I said my kryptonite is I'm attracted to shiny objects. The great thing about crypto is it's unimaginable to me I will ever see anything for the rest of my life as shiny as crypto is. That its ability to change the world and the impact it can have. I can't imagine that I won't be doing this hopefully 24/7 in 20 years, right? And when I got in at 17, I was, I said from the moment I saw it, I said, saw the crypto light, that this is going to be the biggest thing to happen in the history of humanity. And we're here at the very, 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 very beginning. People are, right? Am I too late? It hasn't even begun yet. Anybody who gets in now in 20 years will be called an OG. Yeah.
I mean, and they're calling the OGs the ones that are like 2010, 11, or 12 right now. But you're right. The people that get in 2020 by 2050, you're an OG. I mean, this thing is
exactly.
going parabolic.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, now, I've had a number of people call me an OG, because I was here, June of 2017, right? And, so,
yeah. All right. So maybe we should talk about Bolt. I've always say, I've had successes like, your opportunity choices plus luck. And I've had a lot of really good luck in life, but I've had a lot of bad luck, and we both share that experience. So maybe we should talk about that experience and how we were on the raw end of the deal of bad luck with Universal. I mean, that was a tough time.
Yeah, and as I said, that's why I stopped being an entrepreneur, because it was such a tough time. And that's what you sign up for, when you become an entrepreneur. And I think that entrepreneurialism has been glamorized and to be something that's better than having a job. I really don't view it as better. I view it as different, and different pluses, but different minuses.
You know what story I want you to tell everybody? It's a fucking great story. So you bought my company, which was one of the largest video sharing sites. We were bigger than YouTube, but you also tried to buy YouTube. You actually reached out to those guys. And then the 5-year anniversary story, I would love for you to tell that.
No offense, but what you had built wasn't rocket science. So we could build it ourselves at Bolt, but we thought, well, maybe there's somebody who has an audience or has the technology or has something that that would be worth buying. And so we looked at YouTube, and I can't remember, there's a third one that we looked at, and it could have been, and so you were just bigger, and you were growing faster, and you were more excited, and so it was a great fit. But I don't know, a month or two after we bought you, somebody uploaded a video called Lazy Sunday onto YouTube. And even though at that time we were 2 to 3 times bigger than them, that day YouTube became the fastest growing website in the history of the world. And 6 months later, they were bought by Google for $1.5 billion. And I had always kind of lamented the luck that we had, because if they'd uploaded Lazy Sunday onto Bolt, we could have been YouTube and bought by Google for $1.5 billion. And fast forward 5 years for the 5-year birthday
for YouTube.
YouTube, they had invited me to go to their party that they'd moved to, from New York to San Francisco. And I hadn't seen Chen for 5 years. When I saw him, he thanked me for coming, and I congratulated him on all the success. But I couldn't help myself, and I said, hey, if they had uploaded Lazy Sunday onto Bolt, we would have been YouTube. And he laughed really hard. He says, yeah, he says, of course you would have been. He said, but why would my brother have uploaded it to your site? Which I thought was awesome, because it really, that's 2 lessons in one. One is, it is lightning in a bottle. It is luck. But it turns out, obviously, there's lots you can do to improve your likelihood of getting lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, and I have a similar story. Roloff Botha was their investor at Sequoia, and I said something to the effect of, like, if it wasn't for that one video, and he's like, and he started a tap dance. He was doing like this, and I was like, what are you doing, dude? And we were at some bar in San Francisco, and he goes, it's a delicate tap dance. You guys had to play it right. He's like, you didn't use those takedown notices to your advantage. They publicized their takedown notice. We just responded.
We were. Yeah, the mistake we made, and it was our fault, but the mistake we made is we listened to our lawyers.
Exactly. Turns out they're not the smartest people in the room.
Right? I mean, you should take Yeah, look, I mean, they have a vision and a view, and they're trying to solve for something, but it's much different than what you're trying to solve for. And it's a piece of information and data that you should take in, but not as the gospel that you should just follow.
Yeah, I'd imagine the Uber lawyers were probably saying, you really shouldn't do these things. You have to get a medallion, right?
Exactly.
Let's go apply for medallions in every city. You know, they're like, yeah, I don't think so. Let's fast forward. So in 2010, so we got sued in what, 06, and then we went out of business, 06, 07, I think it was 07, yeah. I think. And I started my ad network, which was growing. I think you were in between things at the time, just investing. I think you were in the domain business. You said you had tens of thousands of domain names with your partner. And at that time I was running my ad network, which I started in 2007. And you know, I came to you because I saw an opportunity in the secondary market. I bought stock in Facebook, a company called Felix Investments that was a broker dealer, and they were getting it from employees. And I was like, dude, there's gotta be an opportunity here. So I remember coming to you then, and it wasn't on my radar, it wasn't on your radar. Nobody was thinking about this, but I was like, I think there's a flourishing market that's about to happen here. And then we started a blog, remember, Second Shares, and wrote that research paper on Facebook and Zynga and a couple others. And like, you just took it and ran. I mean, I wanted to do a fund. We went to Scaramucci actually, and he was like, I don't see the opportunity here, which is actually funny when you think about it, right? But we saw it, but you really ran after it, because I kept running the ad network when we couldn't raise the capital. And then why don't we talk about that? So like, at that point in time,
Well, you asked me what my superpower was, I think, earlier in the show. And I said, I think it was seeing things that necessarily weren't early, not a futurist, but having enough confidence in myself. And that was really kind of I'd been an equity analyst on Wall Street and would find something I loved every year and really feel adamant and pound the table on it. It had been 10 years. And you brought up Facebook. And I really thought, I'd been an equity analyst on Wall Street. I'd actually run a social network. I really thought, I'm probably as smart as anybody on the planet to actually understand how Facebook much is worth. And it was pretty actively traded through Felix and others at $16 billion. This was late 2009. And I ran the numbers. I remember thinking before I ran them. I bet it's worth $2 billion. And I ran it, was shocked to think it was worth $50 billion at that time. And so, I remember, going to, more than just Scaramucci about raising some money to buy the shares, not that complicated, and literally getting laughed at.
Everybody, do you remember what Mooch said? Mooch said that, Lou, I'll never forget this. He goes, how do we know they'll ever go public? Mark has control of the company. I was like, wait, what? It was crazy.
Look, there's always a reason not to buy something, right? You can always come up with a great reason not to buy something. And, look, ultimately it's our fault for not telling a compelling enough story. They want to make money. And so,
100%.
And again, I wrote the research report. I just had to write it. It's just like, hey, world, blah. And ultimately, we had our website, but ultimately we weren't monetizing in any way. And a friend of mine, who was running equity capital markets at Wedbush Securities, she'd actually got my first job on Wall Street in '94, and here we are, getting another job again 16 years later. And so I became Wall Street's first social media analyst, right? About Facebook and other private companies, and opening up the first private shares trading desk on Wall Street. And it was, outside of Facebook, the market really, wasn't that big. Everything combined, I don't think was.
No, yeah, you're right. But Chris Sacca saw it in Twitter, and he was doing it over Twitter, which I didn't know at the time. I found out years later when he was on Shark Tank, and I only knew him when he worked at corporate, Google corporate, whatever. He did like M&A and stuff.
But already by that time, Chris was a guy who had a lot of cash and had a reputation.
Access. People
wanted him on the cap table. People weren't so interested in Wedbush and our clients getting them on the cap tables. And so, and also, there was interest. There was a lot of scammers, in the market. When I left Wedbush, kind of the first deal that they did was with this guy. I don't know if you ever ran across Omar Amanat. But I mean, and he sold Wedbush $5 million of Twitter. And then by the time it was public, it was $10 million of Twitter, except he actually didn't know.
Wow. It's like a Bernie Madoff in the secondary market.
Yeah, totally. No, it was full of Bernie Madoff.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so, these markets, and here we are all these years later. And, there's, it's still, and you were talking about this earlier, right? I mean, it's to the VC's advantage and to the investment bankers' advantage to keep these markets opaque. Yeah. Right. And keep the value creation more to themselves than to the public. Yeah.
And I remember when you took the job at Wedbush, because you were like, I got good news and bad news. And I was like, okay, what's the good news and bad news? And you're like, the bad news is I'm running up dry. I'm not seeing anybody who wants to invest in this. The good news, which is kind of bad news for you too, is that I'm going to have to take a job over at Wedbush here. I think it's going to make more sense. And I think it will lead to better things for both of us in the future, which it did, because then it led to you raising your own fund. And then I think the largest investment you made was in our company.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like what are the things too? Like life is long, and my religion, I'm culturally feel very close to Judaism, but religiously, my religion is karma.
Yeah, I totally agree. What you put into the world, you get right back out.
Look, some good people get hit by buses and some assholes.
Right. Life is random.
It does happen. 99% of us.
There's a lot of randomness to it, but I think you can create a luck too with your effort. Yeah. You got to make the right choices, and you got to have good instincts and intuition. And that part you can't teach people. And I think I see a common thread there with the people I talk to on this show is you got good instincts.
Yeah, but also you learn. I think being open, having an open mind, and learning from your mistakes. I mean, I've made lots and lots of mistakes, and some twice, but not many. And that's when I get pissed at myself. I don't get pissed when you make a mistake. If you make the best, you make the best decision you can at the time, and learn and don't make the same mistake again.
Let's talk Bitcoin. I love talking Bitcoin.
Rock
Okay.
and roll.
I don't know if you saw. I sent you an invite on Clubhouse. I now have my own Bitcoin club.
Yeah, you're like the Clubhouse Bitcoin king. Congratulations. So that's been super impressive, right? Yeah, you dove in. Talk about diving in.
I went down the rabbit hole pretty hard, and so my club is.
But on Clubhouse.
Yes, on Clubhouse. Yeah.
Like how you dove.
Oh, it's awesome. And the people I'm talking to, they're like, they're befriending very big influencers within the Bitcoin community. So it's really, I'm learning a lot from those guys. They're really smart. I created a club called Digital Gold. I can't believe there wasn't a club called Digital Gold already. So I got the Digital Gold one. That's kind of cool. What?
Nathan Pocket might have a problem with that.
Who?
But.
Yeah. The author. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a term. I don't know if did he trademark it? We'll find out. Stay tuned.
I thought crypto oracle was a term I could.
Yeah, tell everybody about that. That's crazy that happened.
No, I mean it actually really reminded me of our time
Universal.
at Gould. We were this little company, and then, so Universal Music sued us, and this was Oracle sued. I mean, there are lots of, if you go to YouTube or you have lots of people who call themselves crypto oracle. I didn't see any other lawsuits, but
I have a similar.
And I was largely by this time just blogging. There was no more company left. It was just me blogging.
I have a similar story. In 2016, I bought a domain name and I was going to build it was a video version of what Clubhouse was. I didn't ever envision people just sitting there talking audio. I thought video, because we're obviously video guys, right? We've been at the precipice of that. And I was like, you know what? At some point it'd be cool if you could have a FaceTime with somebody and everybody can just chime in and just watch. So imagine like Kim Kardashian, or that's probably a bad example, maybe Beyonce and Jay-Z, right? Like she's just driving in the car and he's at the office, whatever, in studio, and they're having a conversation, and like a million of their fans are just watching the conversation, and they obviously are aware of it, you know? So I bought this domain name, facecall.com. It was available. I was like, are you kidding me? So I buy the domain, start to go through a little bit of try to build out an MVP, and we get a lawsuit because I filed a trademark and it got on the radar at Facebook, and the Facebook lawyers came after us. So that idea was like kind of dead in the water because I thought the name was very important for the idea, which is really stupid actually, but it's like there's always like the large companies, they just think litigate, right? And it's like the founders have nothing to do with this. Zuckerberg clearly didn't know anything about it, or Sheryl or anyone. This is what they do. They just file lawsuits and go after people.
Yeah, it's a competitive advantage. The laws are set, by the lobbyists, and the lobbyists are from the large companies, and they've created an ever increasingly uncompetitive landscape.
When did you first learn about Bitcoin? The first time, do you remember hearing about it? The first time ever?
The first time I can remember was in late 2013. A good friend reached out and said, "What do you think of Bitcoin?" And I said, "I think it's stupid." And he said, "How much about it do you know?" And I said, "Nothing." He says, "Well, if you learn about it, I'd like to know, because my partner is just on me every day to buy it, and I've either got to buy it or give him a good reason why not." And that's when I decided to do my first Bitcoin webinar.
I think I told you the other day, I looked through my emails to type in, when's the first time I had an email with the word Bitcoin in it? And one of the first times was around 2013. It was a couple of years earlier with some things from like Fred Wilson's blog. It must have been, summarized. So he talked about it a bunch, but it was that webinar thing. It's the same email format you still send out today.
Yeah, exactly. I've really evolved.
That's funny. So what is your origin story though for like the aha moment? And you call it, what do you call the aha moment?
Seeing the crypto light.
Yep.
Seeing the crypto light. Well, so what was funny so I send out these emails, when I'm going to do a webinar, and I had like 5,000 people on the email distribution list. So I think it was from the first webinar, I get an email from a domainer that I hadn't talked to in years. And he says, "Hey, I didn't know you were into Bitcoin. Are you still into domains? I can buy Bitcoin wallet for $25,000, but I don't have $25,000. And if you wire me $25,000, we can be partners." So I wired him $25,000. The next day I see on the Whois that he owns bitcoinwallet.com. So great. So he calls me a week later. He says, "Hey, there's this new thing called Ethereum, and they're having a conference down in Miami next month. And why don't we go to Miami? I bought $500 worth of airtime for 5 minutes to sell Bitcoin wallet. You want to go?" And I'm like, you know what? I haven't heard of this Ethereum thing, but if it is a thing, why would anybody at an Ethereum conference care about bitcoinwallet.com? Obviously, I wish you luck. Go have fun. And he went to like the seminal moment in crypto history. Invited me. I laughed at him for inviting me to it, and he sold it. He sold it for $125,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of my first kind of little taste of crypto. Go, hey, maybe this is a thing. And I spent that year kind of looking at it with maybe 10% of my time. I went down the rabbit hole. The Wall Street Journal wrote an article quoted me as Wall Street's Bitcoin expert. When I knew nothing, literally. And
Fake news.
but I met some, I met a number of people who are seminal today. I had Barry Silbert on one of my calls. I had Chris Larson.
I remember
on
the
one
Barry
of my
Silbert
calls.
call. Yeah.
I had Wences Caceres on one of my calls. I met Wences in Palo Alto. I mean, he's really I think, widely considered to be kind of ground zero for crypto in Silicon Valley. But after looking at it for more than a year, I mean, I and not seeing it the whole time the price is going down, I just kind of moved on to what I thought were shinier objects. And then on June 29th, 2017, when ICOs were going crazy, he held a webinar. Olaf Carlson Wee said something on the webinar, and I saw the crypto light, and I was in a manic state for 3 months, writing little articles to learn. And then after 3 months, I put my kind of said, okay, I now have a framework, and wrote a blog post, kind of with all my thoughts. And that was really, and that was my first piece on Medium that went to #1, the most read thing. For 3 days, after which, according to Medium, I was the 3rd most influential crypto blogger in the world, which made me about a guy in crypto, proving my first point of the 7 Thoughts on Crypto piece, which was nobody knows anything.
That's so funny. These guys think I'm the most compelling. They don't know anything.
Exactly. No, nobody does, right? It was the very beginning of this huge thing. And, it was 3.5 years ago. It's really, since that was October of 2019. And, it was just, it's been crazy, right? It has gotten, obviously, I got right in at the bubble. I mean, I had 6 months of the bubble. I joke, when I got into the internet, I had 3 months of the bubble before it crashed. And this time I had 6 months of the bubble before the crash. And so I'm getting a little better at getting in. But what I did much better was, life is all about timing, and, business is all about timing. Yeah. It's not what you do as much as when you do it. And you can't get timing right. The only thing you can do is
keep trying.
Around.
Yeah. What do you used to say? What was it? What was the saying you used to say? Showing up's half the battle. Whose quote is that? You used to say that to me a bunch.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's a good one. Yeah.
Woody Allen, I think. What is the most compelling aspect of Bitcoin to you?
The fact that it's decentralized, the fact that there's nobody who controls it. It's a community that controls it. I mean, that to me is the most compelling thing about crypto in general. Is the world. The world broadly sucks for most people, because there's people in the middle who are solving for themselves, and fuck them. Let's just, solve for the community and let everybody do what they want. I don't want, if somebody wants to have a gun and let his 4-year-old use his gun, God bless. I don't want him to tell him to stop having his 4-year-old using his gun. I just don't want to live next door to him. I want to be someplace where that doesn't happen and be with a community of like-minded people. And I think ultimately that's what these tools are about, is letting you get in the communities with like-minded people and live by the rules that, rules without rulers.
What year was your first purchase, though?
I still actually have some. I bought some from 2014.
Okay. Wow, that's great. And
yeah, not enough. Obviously nobody ever.
Right, you just got your toes in a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked Scaramucci this question. If you were Apple and you have $200 billion in cash on the balance sheet, what would you be doing? Would you be buying Bitcoin, and how much?
That's it's so early now, right? So I mean, for somebody like Apple, it's interesting. It's so small. They couldn't buy. They move the market a lot if they bought 50 billion, right? If they made a really meaningful move. And so if you're not going to make a meaningful move, do you really want to use the mind share that it takes to buy it and defend it and talk about it? Is that really what you want to be talking about? Is it Bitcoin? I don't know.
So you're in the camp that they may not do it.
I'm in the camp that it's not a one size fits all. It's a thing. It has certain properties that I think are highly attractive to people. I think there will be, lots of people who lose their job for doing it. Right? It's easier if you're the CEO. And it's going up if you bought it and it craters by 75% as it has time after time after time. That would be devastating for companies. And so, do companies want to be in?
I wonder if I
would.
I wonder if they're going to do something with the Apple Wallet to include holding crypto.
It's a great question. I mean, obviously they should.
Right.
There are the wallet is. I think that they appreciate that the digital wallet. The massive value, right? Kathy Wood wrote something saying that she thinks the average digital wallet has a value of $20,000.
Yeah, I mean, you can put your passports in there and stuff, I think, in some of these digital wallets. And I know specifically with the Apple one, you can put your tickets for your flights in there and stuff. So why not your crypto?
Yeah, well, ultimately, right, there's so many things that are intertwined, right? It could ultimately be your identity.
What's your favorite Bitcoin book?
The Digital Gold, I think, was a great, we are where we are for a reason. And, I'm less, the interest in the technical parts and more of the history to get an understanding of, why we are where we are. And that book gave me really a great history.
Give me a 5 and a 10-year prediction on what you think the Bitcoin price could be.
Sure. Yeah. I have a blog post that has a 10-year price target of $1 million.
Why so bearish?
Did you see the Kraken CEO on Bitcoin?
I didn't say it. No.
No, he was on Bloomberg.
No, I didn't say it.
He was on Bloomberg, and there's a great chyron with the Kraken CFO. It's like Kraken. It says Kraken CFO says Bitcoin is going to infinity.
I love that price. It's a great price.
Yeah, and I took the peek. I took the pic and tweeted. And I thought I was bullish. Look, I think I think the only way for me personally, right, to get context to it is I think of it as a store of value, and in broad figures today, the store of value is a $10 billion market. Okay, and I think when you get something that is dramatically better in a market,
yeah,
10 trillion, yeah, 10 trillion, yeah. And when you get something that's dramatically better in a market, what happens? Well, it takes market share, and that's what most people have focused on. Well, what share is it going to get? I think much more important than what share it's going to get actually is how is it going to impact the market itself. Now that the market is so much more functional, I think you can get a market, let's say over the next 10 years, if the market goes from 10 trillion to 40 trillion, and Bitcoin can get half of that. Right. So it expands the market for gold. Gold doubles in value, and Bitcoin goes to 20 trillion. And at 20 trillion, you're at $1 million, round figures of Bitcoin.
Who do you consider to be one of the most influential people in Bitcoin?
Sure. Well, today I really think the person who's moving the ball forward the most and evangelizing and is brilliant and entertaining is Michael Saylor.
I agree. Totally. Yeah. He makes a very complex problem simple the way he talks about it, I think.
And he makes it fun and he makes it entertaining.
Yeah.
And he pokes an eye to all the
and then he's got the balls to put in all their capital. So that it's he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Yeah. Exactly. No, he's got it all. He really has got it all. And, the right person at the right time, right? He got Elon involved, I think, right?
At BIGToken, do you guys have any of your cash on the balance sheet? Are you going to move any of that cash on the balance sheet into Bitcoin? Is that a consideration that you might be having?
Yeah, look, undoubtedly. And it's not, I think Bitcoin certainly makes a lot of sense as a store of value. I had an opportunity to actually participate in the super hot ICO and actually tried to get it on the balance sheet of the company. And we actually weren't yet able to get ourselves through the accredited investor thing. Right. So we're a penny stock on the OTC today. So, and even our parent, who's been, on the higher tier of the OTC. Yeah. Shracks, I wasn't able to get them. I tried to get them. So, it turns out nothing is easy. But, I think we want to be also be a thought leader, and really help Michael Saylor, help other companies appreciate that they can put it on their balance sheets. And, right now, I think he's doing the right thing and focusing on the Elon Musks of the world. I think there's much more of an opportunity. There are 100x more OTC companies, than there are Fortune 500 companies. So, and I think maybe we can even have a bigger impact talking to smaller companies and helping them to appreciate the value of putting Bitcoin on your balance sheet.
Awesome. Lou, I took up a lot of your time and our video got cut out, so we had to reconnect everything on a separate day, actually. So we wore the same shirts, just so everybody knows. But anyway, I really appreciate your time, and I also appreciate you being a thought leader in the space for Bitcoin. And most importantly, I appreciate you introducing me to my wife, basically. So.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. I was a little worried at first, but I think you've done well by her, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. And really, and thanks again for everything you're doing for the community, because this is great. What you're doing on Clubhouse is great, and it's it's all for the benefit of the community. So win-win.
Thanks. Cool. All right, we'll talk. Take care.